6, right? So we've got a lot of work to do there. And I think the governor is starting to hear that. Certainly the lieutenant governor, Tim Murray, coming out of Worcester, has heard that. The Speaker of the House heard that, and I think we're going to have a real debate in the state about how we restructure our funding and the emphasis we place on it. I keep talking, I don't mean to waste all your time, I keep, at the end of our 200-page report, Staying Power, the Future of Manufacturing in Massachusetts, I said what the real problem we have, and you may see it even at Holyoke Community College, is what I call the Rodney Dangerfield effect, right? Manufacturing gets no respect. We think it's dead. There are 250,000 people working in manufacturing now. Last month, nationwide, we only created 38,000 net jobs. 49,000 of the 38,000 were in manufacturing. It's coming back. It's a key part of our state. It's a key part of the economy. You can't have a strong economy without manufacturing. And people are starting to learn that. But it's going to put a renewed emphasis on the importance of community colleges and voc ed, and we need to make sure we also have the dollars there.
Another comment here, and then we'll take another bite of the SWOT.
Hi, my name is Dave Caputo. I run Positronic Design, a marketing company, and the Adminicus Green Energy Jobs Consortium, both in Holyoke. And I noticed that you mentioned that we have about 60% of the average price of electricity in the state, so we have very competitive electric rates. But you made no mention of the fact that at least 60% of that energy comes from carbon-free sources. I really think that Holyoke was founded as a green energy city, industrial city, in 1850, and still has the highly functioning green energy infrastructure, and I really think that that should be on the top of all agendas around promoting Holyoke, because it's really a differentiator that other cities cannot just change a policy and create.
Absolutely. No, that you have, you know, the abundance of hydropower you have here is a potentially phenomenal comparative advantage. It's already resulted in being able to put the high-powered computing center here, high-performance computing center. But there's a whole lot of other industries.
On the SWOT.
What?
You didn't mention it on this list
Well,
of cities' advantages, and I think it should be at the top of
Well, I did put down electric rates, but I should have said green electric
Well, that's,
rates.
I think, almost more than cost, especially in the future.
I will fix it.
Well, and
right.
The carbon credits that might be coming, it would be a huge additional financial incentive to locate here.
that is a great segue
Fantastic.
to the next step. So I thank you, sir, for what you've done for us, and look forward to the rest of your comments. And let me tell you, we're going down 2 pathways. The SWOT analysis is now beginning. And so Dan Hodge, the HDR team, has pulled together the true quad view, which has an energy component to it. I'm going to ask all of you to draw on what we've learned from EDSAT analysis and now apply it to what Dan Hodge is going to take us through in the thorough SWOT analysis. So now you've kind of got the front-end tutorial on where the market is going. Now let's look at what the HDR team has identified as the true SWOT for the market. Okay? All right, Dan?
Great. Thank you, Don. And thank you again, Barry. You're confident and accomplished, and yet you still were humble enough to suggest that maybe you were wasting my time. So I appreciate that humility. As Don was saying, we really valued going through the EDSAT process to form a data-driven, honest assessment where we could compare Holyoke to other towns and cities. In parallel, as I think a lot of the people in this room know, we've been gathering a lot of data, doing a lot of interviews, trying to do, in essence, a set of baseline conditions and SWOT assessment for different geographies here. We're working at different levels, and that assessment was focused more on Holyoke as a city. We're talking about center city / downtown, and I think where we're really going here, an innovation district. And some of the conditions in this area of Holyoke are very different from the rest of the city. In some situations, based on data availability, we're really focusing on Holyoke as a city in its entirety. We are also looking at the region, and for the most part, we have defined the region as Hampden, Hampshire, and Franklin counties. And where possible, we're trying to do some comparison to Massachusetts and the US for context. We're trying to be data-driven, and as I mentioned, informed by lots of stakeholder interviews. So a lot of this will be data, but a lot of this is findings based on existing programs, strengths and weaknesses that the experts in this room and throughout the community have noted. And we're trying to focus, similar to EdSat, on metrics that matter from a site selection and economic development perspective. Last time we had this nice clicker. I felt very, smooth. Sure. Yeah. So we're going to run through a bunch of different categories here, and some of this will be similar, but again, we will have comments on both Holyoke as well as the region. First topic area is demographics. Go ahead to the next. And we'll present a few data slides and then jump into a 4-quadrant diagram. Members of the task force, I think, saw a very similar but slightly earlier version of this presentation that was emailed out a few days ago. Hopefully a fair number of people had a chance to look at it. And as we go, please jump in with questions. I know Don will be helping me to make sure that we do make this interactive. Just quickly on population growth, and this is similar to what Barry was saying, the U.S. has been growing historically much faster than Massachusetts, and the region has been growing even slower than Massachusetts, and Holyoke over the past 15 years or so has actually lost population. Median household income. On the left-hand side is Holyoke, on the far right-hand side is the U.S., and we basically have a step progression here. We're from Holyoke to the Springfield metro area, we go a bit higher, and then when we get to Massachusetts statewide, we're above the U.S. averages. And this is consistent with the gateway studies that some people have found where the Boston metro area has been the one really driving the per capita income growth, and it's other areas like Holyoke that need more enhancement of income. Poverty rates, this has jumped out again in the gateway cities work as some entrenched poverty. In Holyoke, somewhat staggering, over 25% compared to about 7.5% statewide. Just a few other data points. Holyoke's population was about 40,000 in 2009. The region about 700,000. Center City, the 4 wards, was about 27% of the city's population. Large Hispanic population, of course, in Holyoke, with about 83% of the population in Center City, almost 50% for the city overall. And interesting on the demographic side, the demographic trend, especially in Center City, but even for Holyoke overall, is different than the state. A very high percentage of people under the age of 24 in the Center City. So those are some background data points. We then tried, between the data and our findings, to put together some thoughts on strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. I'll try to run through some of these. In the interest of time, I may not cover every one, but please feel free to jump in if you have a question. And I apologize if not everyone can read. Alan, as a test, or Jim, can you guys see the text from the back?
No, not great.
Okay. Well, I'll read a bunch, and we'll take it from there. Looking for help or comments in terms of how we're wording things, or if there are items that we're missing. So, in Holyoke, a strength is actually the young and diverse population. So it's actually, like I was saying, a little bit different than the state overall. On the weaknesses side, not only actually a loss of population in Holyoke over the past 15 years. The region as a whole has been relatively stagnant in terms of population growth. Some concentrations of poverty and lower per capita income, to support expanding, retail or restaurant or other kinds of services. It's not to say that we don't support some, but it limits that potential. There are definitely opportunities in this area, and in our conversations with developers, we certainly see a mix of development opportunities, not just industrial, not just looking at low-cost energy, but also focusing on some of the older mill buildings for live work. The historic base of population in downtown Holyoke was certainly larger. There's some infrastructure to accommodate more people in the area. Certainly available in young workforce proximate to the Innovation District or right here in the Innovation District. And really trying to sort of play up the idea that development should be balanced between work opportunities, live opportunities, learning, and recreation and play. Some of the threats, certainly the entrenched poverty and the need to link job opportunities and education and skills. If the young population is an opportunity, we have to make sure that it's one that we're successful with. And then on the development side, in general, the cost of new residential development being greater than the market rates that you can get for it is another challenge. Bill?
Sorry again, but when I look at this SWOT and you say the strength is a young, when you say the strength is a young population as a whole, is anybody drilling down on that young population to find out what its incidence of poverty versus the population as a whole, or its incidence of educational levels as compared to the population as a whole? And then what does that do to a realistic look at that young population? Simply calling it a strength because you put it in the quadrant, certainly potentially,
Yeah.
there are hundreds of these young kids that are diamonds in the rough. But I have a little bit of trouble seeing strengths displayed simply in that way.
I think that's a good point. I mean, there's got to be a little bit more nuance there. It's not like I was trying to get at it. It's kind of a potential strength, but there's more work to do to make it a successful strength.
Oh, Barry.
I just thought one other thing that you might want to add to your strength about the demographics. I'm an example of someone who moved here from Northampton, and I know a lot of other people who moved here from the Northampton area because the housing prices are attractive.
Right.
And that's one thing that relative to Massachusetts housing prices, houses are cheap in Holyoke. You just go 10 miles up the street, for the same house, you'll pay 3 times as much. In Northampton, you'll pay twice as much as is across the river, within a mile of itself. So that's something that should be part of the Holyoke marketing thing. Young professionals, come here, move here. We're right next to Northampton, and you can buy houses for pennies on the dollar.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. We actually have that in a further on place, but it probably may belong here. Ann, and then maybe we'll keep going, but hold your,
Well,
we'll have plenty of time for more thoughts. So.
A quick follow-up on his thought was that maybe there's an opportunity to, it seems like this is focused on a very tight geographic area of just the Innovation District itself. And if you talk about the overall view of Holyoke and looking at the possible strengths and opportunities and looking at the attractive housing stock for people to locate to Holyoke who might be interested in being in an older industrial area, that might see the attractiveness of the canals and looking at that as an additional aspect that's a positive attribute of this community. I'm wondering how the segue happens to the looking at the core area to the larger city, to the region, and how you're planning to do that as part of the SWOT analysis.